player will.
Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Today we're talking about the meta, not only in global, but in JP, where we have a 1 month, head start on seeing what they have for releases. And so this is going to be not only looking at real-time data, but also some personal predictions, because we don't always exactly follow the JP trend of what units get used the most. And so when I look at these things, just to give some insight as to how I back up my thoughts, not only do I, obviously use my own personal analysis, where I've spent years now doing content creation, that I try to at least put my own personal spin on cause and effect, but obviously there is something to be said about actual raw data here. And so I typically look at the top 10 guilds, which some might say, hey, Will, that's not really fair. That's only a small selection of the player base. But the thing about top 10 guilds that give a unique little bit of insight is that, A, because they are in the top 10, they do tend to compete a little harder, which means they tend to stress test things and typically have a little bit of a wider collection of resources at their disposal, that they probably have more vision cards than the average player does. They probably look at their trust stones more often than the average player does. They probably spend more time mocking and guild war to try to find the best competitive iteration. And so while the top 10 isn't always indicative of the general player base, it does give some decent insights as to the actual strength of the characters because of how often people are using them. Not to mention, a lot of the whales tend to congregate up there. Now, there's whales all over the game. You don't have to be top 10 to be a whale, but because of that, it means that they tend to build these units a little bit faster. So when we're looking for like immediate analysis, you can usually see it a lot clearer in the top 10 because they get these units up to max a lot faster than the rest of the player base. So when you're looking for immediate trends, this tends to be a really good spot to look. And there is a really important difference between teams on offense and teams on defense. And this does apply for general Guild Wars, so this should hopefully help you as well. Units that are the strongest in the game tend to be used on defense more than offense. And the reason for that is because when you set a team on defense, you don't know who's going to attack you. And so you have to come up with a team that you think can generally beat the widest array of different enemies coming at you, which tends to mean it needs to be the strongest overall team that can beat the most things. That's not necessarily true on offense, though, where when you make a team for offense, you can basically pick and choose what enemy you want to hit. So you have a lot more freedom and agency to pick the matchup that's most favorable for you on offense, which means even if your team isn't the greatest team ever on offense, it doesn't have to be. It just has to be good enough that the team you're selecting on defense, you know you have a favorable matchup there. And the final thing is teams that do really good on offense, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, this offensive team can beat a whole bunch of defenses. It's beating nearly everything. That's where you start to see teams start to shift on going from the offensive side to the defensive side for that same logic. If you have an offensive team that you're finding can beat nearly every defense you throw at it, well, then that's a good defensive team because you know it can beat nearly any offensive team people throw at it. So there is a little bit of a lag on how units on the offensive side eventually transition to the defensive side once you get enough data to really prove that this really is the best team against the widest variety of things. So without talking your ear off anymore, I do think that's insightful and helpful to know. This is what we're looking at the moment for the global side of things and the top 10 guilds over the last 2 weeks of September in Guild Wars. And the top chart here is teams used on offense, and the bottom chart here is teams used on defense. And so we are obviously seeing a large congregation of Shreka, Sephiroth, and Summer Resnick. That's no surprise. That has been the favorite combo for a couple weeks now, and they are used at roughly a 60% overall use rate on offense here. And we're actually seeing nearly identical things here on defense, and actually a little bit higher. You're seeing an overall usage rate of Sephiroth at 68%. He's way at the higher end there. And quick pause, this is a little bit of why players in Global feel slightly frustrated and say that the meta feels kind of stale, because the offensive and defensive teams really kind of mirror each other. So it does not appear to be a lot of mingling and mixing and matching. There certainly could be. You're not forced to use these teams, but this doesn't paint a pretty picture. But when we look at the JP side of things, this is the same time frame of 2 weeks, but remember, they are a month or so ahead, 4 weeks to 5 weeks ahead. And immediately you'll notice on offense, they are far more diverse than we are. You have a whole bunch of units here that have been released throughout the year so far. Cloud, Joom, Cypher, Lucille, all really good to see. And you're actually noticing two more recent glove units here. This is the Crimson Wizard from the Trials of Mana collab, and Sadali, the new Earth unit, who's a glove unit. And this is where I want to pause to do a quick little look forward into what we're expecting. For those of you that aren't terribly familiar, this week we are supposed to get news that the new Lilith unit, who's a 70 cost light unit, will be released this next week in global in a couple days here. But then the week after that, we are going to start the Trials of Mana collaboration. We do get Duran for free. We also get Angela in that same week. You can pull for her on the banner. The week after is where the permanent pool Sodali unit comes in, and then the Crimson Wizard is that same week or week after. And so we do have 4 incoming units within the next, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. So considering Crimson Wizard, but there are also a slew of vision cards coming out too, and quite frankly, they're not all amazing. Some of them are. The Sadali vision card is very, very good, but other cards like the Crimson Wizard and even the Lilith card really don't have a huge influence on things overall. And so knowing what that future roadmap is, now we can kind of go back to JP and get a little idea of what they're doing. So obviously there's far more diversity on the offensive side. When we look at the defense, it's still roughly similar to what we have. You're still seeing Sephiroth used prevalently at that like 62% pick rate. That's almost exactly the same. But you are seeing a little bit less of Shreka, a little bit less of Summer Resnick, and a little more mixed defenses here, which JP has always kind of done. They don't have the same amount of time to mock their battles that we do on global, and so they don't tend to strictly stay on certain defensive walls throughout time. But I think what you're seeing here is a little more flexibility in the defense, knowing that there's a pretty wide variety of offensive things coming at you, that you're starting to see the fringes of the meta starting to break apart here, where once you see a lot of different teams being able to beat the meta team, that's where the meta team starts to turn over. And we've seen this time and time again, most recently, theoretically, with the Helen of the Black Rose meta, where, it took a while for that to kind of be shaken, but over time, there became more and more teams that could beat that mage team, and that's when a meta starts to shift. When you're no longer beating everything, then you're no longer the meta team. And so I think you're starting to see the beginnings of that, where not only do you see far less Gilgamesh here on defense, which is something that we still see a fair amount of, but you are seeing overall downward trends in a couple of these other units and upward trends in others. And so my personal thought, and maybe not so much a prediction, but I do want to draw special attention to this glove meta theoretically that could be incoming with the Crimson Wizard and Sodali units. And the reason why I say that, these two units complement each other exceptionally well. They have a little bit of overlap with the Summer Resnick unit, who is a book unit, but Glove does have some decent vision cards. And the cool thing about Global is that I don't think we've seen Shrek be as powerful as JP has. We have tended to use a little bit more of Gilgamesh than they have, and so that matchup has kind of kept her in check. And if I were just guessing, looking at some of the vision cards that were released, you obviously have 2 Glove vision cards being released here. But Glove overall is one of the stronger groups for vision card access. They have a lot of things here. They have 3 agility cards, 3 area res cards, and that new Sodali one is a very, very hyper valuable unit resistance one. And they do have a lot of offensive oriented ones too. Now, these are limited, so this is where I think you have to make some judgment calls here, that, a card like the Roy Mustang card that has magic res penetration on it certainly comes into the limelight now. Now begs the question, how many people on Global have that card? The answer is probably not many. And you could probably say the same for the Kefka Vision card, which is a good sub-slot for them too. But even something like the Addison Ray Vision card that does have a decent sub-slot potential too. How many people built the Addison Ray Vision card or have access to it still now? And so when we get back to the, let's say, meta predictions, I actually don't know if we'll see this on Global, for the simple reason that it's really expensive. When you consider that you have to pull both of these units, that alone is a pretty big visual expenditure. But the fact that you do have to still keep up with the vision cards here as well. We also have news that Exia is coming into JP. She's not on this website yet, but she is a water unit that looks to be really strong against Sephiroth. So she alone might be the change that we start to see. But if it begs the question, if she starts to make Sephiroth trend downward, what's the team that replaces it? And so to me, I do still think there's some good opportunity for Glove to take that spot. Sodali is a permanent pool unit here, and although Shreka certainly seems to be strong enough to deter usage of him, you could make the same argument that Sephiroth's usage should have deterred Gilgamesh, let's say, and that's obviously not the case. And you could have made the same argument that Gilgamesh's usage should have deterred Shreka's uptick, and that obviously is not the case. So I don't think we're in that same element game the same way we always have been. But I do think it's promising that on the JP side, you are seeing this grouping of Sodeley and Crimson Wizard. And if we look at the team that actually is being used most often with the three of them, just to see who that third unit is, do some filtering magic here. To no one's surprise, it's kind of the combination of Lucille and Summer Resnick to kind of be that support that can haste them and heal them and support them, make sure they don't get cursed, things like that. And so that's the top 10, most popular teams. And the positive thing I'm seeing here is looking at the average stars that they get. This is a really important factor to determining whether or not a team can compete with the meta or not. And the break point we're looking for is 3 stars. We want to make sure that you can at least clear a defense. If you have less than 3 stars, that means you're typically stumping on average, meaning you attack a team and you lose, or you're cleaning up scraps of someone else, which doesn't mean it's a strong team. And so I think this is very promising that the amount of stars this team is getting is above 3 in the most cases. Not always, obviously, but for the most part, as a general trend. And one of my favorite things that I think I'm looking forward to is the fact that although this is a very strong Magic team, we do have some very good anti-magic units, and Joom and Cloud as part of the Greatsword team notoriously are. Even the Water Veritas unit is a still great option for anti-magic potential. But if I was a betting man, I would tend to think that while Duran and Angela are high quality characters, I don't think there's a lot here to those characters that a lot of people are going to really gravitate toward and pull on. Whereas I think Sodeley and the Crimson Wizard might be a little more user friendly just in how good they are, where Sodeley is really powerful, another follow up attack unit, and the Crimson Wizard has a bunch of 100% hit chance abilities. So for the average player, he's going to be really easy to put into teams and not have to worry about accuracy or hit rates. He's just going to do a ton of damage and then just call it a day. But that's my thoughts overall. Again, the main takeaways for me is that it's very promising in JP that we are seeing some more diversity on offense to tackle the meta. And while we haven't seen this change just quite yet, Exia in the future is another unit that's absolutely going to bring that Sephiroth percentage usage down a little bit. And it's really just a question of what team starts to creep in and take them over in the meantime. It does seem like Glove is one of those teams that's primed to do so, but Greatsword certainly still has a competitive argument to be made should that happen. But I think you're still going to see a lot of rainbow teams here too, that once Sephiroth's usage is brought down a little bit, and you don't have to worry about Curse as much, you can play a little more with Fina and Lucille and Resnick and not worry about getting cursed, that you'll probably see a lot more rainbow teams with a support and 2 DPS like we just saw with those glove teams. It's not limited to them. I'm sure you'll see lots of Cypher and Cloud teams. Heck, even Angela and Cypher is a half-decent combination given what they are for element. And by the time we actually even get here in 4 to 5 weeks, we might have new JP insights that could throw all of this off anyway. But those are some early preview thoughts, not necessarily to pull recommendations, but just something to be more broadly aware of as to what I'm seeing, where we might diverge or copy JP, and how that might affect what you pull in the future. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody. Per usual, critiques, comments, criticisms, questions, all in the comment section below. Love to interact and bring visibility to the thoughts you guys have too. I'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the week. I'll see you all on the Leonis Report, Monday nights, 9:15 with JB79. Thank you so much.